and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking with Ula Pontikos, BSC, the DP of Season 2 of Russian Doll, which is available on Netflix and is a lot of fun. Season 1 was great, Season 2 also great. She's nominated for an Emmy for, I guess they have to pick an episode, so it's the first episode, but, I thought it was like a spy thriller or something, but it's kind of like but when I didn't know anything about the show, it's kind of like a time travel-y, timey-wimey kind of thingy. First season's handled differently than the second season in regards to the sort of mechanic of time travel. Anyway, just in case you hadn't seen it, but if you have, you know what the hell I'm talking about. This conversation, it's like I say it every week, one of my favorites. Had a great time. A lot of laughs. Ula was very generous with her knowledge and time and expertise. I certainly learned a lot, and like I said, we both had a lot of fun. I will say, if you're just listening, sometimes the Zoom would cut out the laughter, so it sounds like I'm laughing by myself, but if you're watching on YouTube, you'll know it was shared laughter. I noticed when I was editing, I was like, wow, this sounds like all my jokes are dying, but they were not. We were both having equal amounts of fun. Anyway, you're going to love this one. Ula's fantastic, and Emmy's well-deserved, because the show looks great. So I'll let you get to it. Here's my conversation with Ula Pontikos, BSC. You know what's funny is normally at the beginning of the podcast, I ask, like how you got started and stuff. But I happen to have a copy of Preserving the Vision from the BSC.
Okay.
And, here on page 303, it's got everything I need.
I had no idea that they're going to zoom into a picture of my face, because it did, as a wide shot, it sort of makes sense. No vanity intended, but it just looks very odd, that photo.
They did use like a handful of what appear, like some of these are from, award shows or whatever. And then this definitely looks like a BTS photo that they were like, just crop her out. It'll be fine.
But that's the thing. And I had like a photo of my face. Anyway, I'm part of the BSC board of governors, so I should really know better.
Oh man, second edition. This is a nice, but I assume they gave you one of these?
No.
What?
It's okay. I probably will. I supposed to buy it.
Oh yeah, they made me buy it too, obviously. But it apparently got stuck at Pinewood forever, and then the nice woman who sent it to me sent me she packaged it with like 5 BSC tote bags and a polo shirt. So now I got a bunch of BSC swag. But it's nice. It's gilded.
Yeah. No. They put a lot of work into it.
Yeah. But in any case, it says that you started off with a degree in environmental studies.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done the degree, so just for the record.
You studied it.
I have been studying. I've done 2 years. And then I really wanted to do photography. So I took a year out, and I took another year out, and I took another year out and moved the country. And I thought that it's actually, I can't ever imagine going back. I loved the degree, actually. It was rather fabulous. We had mathematics and chemistry and physics, which strangely I wasn't great at, but I wasn't awful. I was just bad enough. All right.
Sure.
But then we had economics, and I was really struggling with that. I really didn't like it.
I was never a phrase that I've stolen is I'm plenty good at math. I'm bad at numbers. So when economics came around in my degree, because it was just like a maths course, I think I failed it. I got a F once and I got a D the second time, and I went, you know what? I'm going to find a different math course.
What was it, like maths and what?
It was just like a general part of my film degree at Arizona State was doing other stuff, just as a part of a liberal arts degree. So I was like, my dad told me macroeconomics is easy. And I got the driest British guy who, like, his PowerPoints were just white background with Times New Roman font. I mean, they were brutal. There was no interest in this thing.
Yeah, especially the beginnings. It's lots of formulas, and I just remember I passed it. I remember I got like a B or C. I don't remember sort of equivalent, but it was such a struggle. I actually had to ask my friend who had a degree in economics to help me out because I was like, oh, I'm so bored.
Well, pulling back on that, then, like, talk to me about getting started in photography, because the book says that you that you got started, like, I guess with your dad shooting photos a lot, or like developing at least, which is a way more fun almost than taking the photos.
I think it's like in my family, we always wanted to be artists. And my dad had a degree in uh, nautical engineering. So he had a degree in ship engines.
Oh,
And
cool.
I think his desire was to be more creative. So he was sort of doing paintings and carving and photography. And it was such a nice way, we were in a very small flat at the time. There was like a two rooms. So it was a living room, bedroom, and then my bedroom and a tiny little bathroom where we got a lot and larger and whoever took a photograph, we tried to sort of print it. So there was fun. There was a sort of fun way of bonding. And then I had he got me a Zenith camera with a lens. I don't remember, and I think I was really bad at it until I went for some death metal concert in Holland when I was 17, and they were actually not so bad anymore. So I thought, oh, maybe I can actually do something with it.
Yeah.
But I think it just goes to show sort of how much practice sort of trains your eye and sort of the way of looking.
Yeah. Well, so you're in New York now.
No, I'm in London.
Oh, right. So, sorry, I got the Russian doll thing stuck in my head.
Oh, yeah.
But even London, to the point I was gonna make, was like a very photogenic city. You know, like a lot of DPs who live in New York. You know, they're like, oh yeah, I just take my camera everywhere, and they have this beautiful street photography, which is a lot more difficult in a place like LA. Was Poland a very photogenic city, or was it a little more? Because when I think of the UK, especially, it's like gray. Like I can't imagine a lot of street photography in the UK.
There, when the sun is right, it's actually pretty stunning. And part of the pandemic sort of exercise was to do a lot of stills or sort of, we all got locked down for months. So I did sort of like a little personal project. It's nothing, took the camera and sort of go to the parks. And with dappled light and the right lenses, there's some interesting things coming out. The light can be incredible, especially during the summertime and some months of the winter when the sun is low. It's actually pretty special. It's very different. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of what interests you. I think there is a lot of gray sky as we have today, but there can be some interesting sort of shapes around, and there are, amazing photographers coming out from the UK.
Yeah. Well, it is that kind of interesting thing where, like, when you have variation, it's when, beauty can kind of come out. Whereas I've heard, especially in like early filmmaking, there's just like this, the people from the UK would describe like LA films. They all just look exactly the same because the sun's always in the exact same spot and everything's got the exact same shadows. And it's like,
But LA has beautiful patterns as well around the sunset. I was
oh yeah.
fascinated by the because you've got a lot of light buildings and then a lot of dappled light around. So there are definitely places which are interesting, and it's so different. I think once it becomes familiar, it's harder to take photographs. So when you go somewhere, the curiosity, the sort of the wandering eye, the unfamiliarity is just it just brings more curiosity. And actually, I noticed when I went to New York, I took more photographs the first time round than when I went the second time round. Your eye is more curious.
Yeah. I actually, this is a question I was going to ask way later, but we're here. Do you think of your photographic eye as being different than your cinematography compositions or anything like that? Because I've tried to, you know, on the little like Fujifilm, the X100, you can set like a 16:9 frame, and I've thought like, oh, I should try to get more cinematic compositions in my photography, but I always find that feels much more difficult, and I don't see those types of compositions in the photo books I have necessarily.
No, I agree. There's something different. I think partially because you do have different formats. And actually, I find that cinema can be a little bit more formulaic than photography. I think
Yes.
because you've got the coverage. When I was graduating from the NFTS, from the film school, part of my thesis was that I took 16mm camera to China, and I did a documentary. It wasn't a documentary. It was sort of like a mood thing on 16mm about jade diggers, and to sort of get to know the place, I took a lot of stills, and I was traveling a lot. The stills weren't actually that great, but there was sort of a lot of reversal. It was actually a very dramatic story because those stills meant to be part of my thesis, and I lost, I don't know, like something like 30 rolls of film. I left it in China.
Oh no!
And we discovered at the airport, and my traveling partner was very, very stressed because I totally freaked out. It was like 3 weeks worth of work, and my graduation and so on, and and we got them sent back to London. You know,
Wow.
some friendly soul, after a long hours of calling from the airport, saying, giving the address, we actually had it sent back to the UK, which was incredible. And it happened to me once before. Actually, the first time when I took a lot of rolls of film, we went for this death metal concert in Bergen, near Leeuwarden. It was in Holland. And I think I lost about 6 or 7 rolls of film, and I found them back. We were scouting the field after the concert at night with torches, and we found them like after 2 hours.
That's amazing.
So twice I lost, like, you know, my whole body of work. I mean, it's all very personal. Like there's nothing really to be published. There's just sort of a way of training my eye and training my taste. But going back to your question, I took a lot of stills, and then in the moment when I started taking moving images, I couldn't go back to stills because my mind sort of switched, and I was quite surprised by it. My mind sort of switched in a different way of storytelling and different way of observing. But I think it's specific to me. I don't know. I'm sure that there's that you can combine it, but I don't take many stills when I work.
Yeah, I personally, I've found that, like, you know, behind the scenes stuff can be fun, you know, photos of your friends working or whatever. But yeah, when I guess, you know, it's kind of said in the medium, but like photography is telling a story in one image and cinematography is telling a story in many images. You know, the context, usually there's more context in a single photographic image than there is in a single frame of film. Not all of them, but sometimes, oftentimes.
Well, I think it's also, you know, you're trying to tell the whole storytelling in one image. Where I had to film a cricket game the other day, and the idea was that you capture it in one image to establish something, and I couldn't do it. Cricket, I couldn't do it because
Just one
the
big wide shot.
boring.
Yeah.
And then you probably could go on a long lens and show some action, but that's like, then you've seen it so many times because it's a sort of a sports shot. So how to do it in a way that you haven't seen it, and I really haven't figured it out. Cricket is a tough one.
Yeah, that's a massive field too.
And you just they just like surround, they make a circle to make it even wider. So you really are nowhere near the action at all. But I keep failing. You know, I lived in the UK for like 24 years, and I keep failing in one of the sort of national sports, understanding cricket.
To be fair, no one watches baseball here, so you know, same. Actually, I want to do you complete sidebar. Do you still are you still a metal fan?
No. No.
I'm going to Mastodon is opening for Ghost for the 4 people who know who that is, and I'm going to the show at the end of the month, and I'm very excited. But no one knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I sort of parted it at the age of 19. I had a massive crush on Sepultura from
Brazil.
I was following them everywhere in Poland. I think my sort of the last gig I've done, it actually wasn't the last gig, but one of the sort of most memorable gigs, that was Monsters of Rock. You know, I'm that old, and that was, I think, 1990 or 1992. I don't remember. We were really young, and that was something really quite special. I'm very glad that I didn't realize how special it was until I saw pictures of my friend focus pulling in Moscow on the same tour, and the amount of people. And then I met somebody else who was actually an operator who was in New York, who came in for a couple of days for us on a show I've done. And he showed me some photographs he took from that tour. That was pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's just such a different time.
Yeah, there's actually a now we're going to go further off the rails. There's a fascinating podcast called Winds of Change, I think it is, about the Scorpions going to Russia when the USSR fell, and fascinating how like the Russians were like kept from, you know, American anything, but especially rock music, and then just how, like, not violently in the truest sense, but just how aggressively they came to it when they were finally given a concert. Same thing with like Metallica and all that. Fun stuff. Anyway, you know, I'll ask a secondary question, because especially now that a lot of movies and television are primarily going to streaming, although we are seeing a mild resurgence or a push to seeing movies in the theaters. Are you do you think of going to a theater in the same way that you think of going to see live music? Is there like a similarity there in your mind, or are they different experiences?
I suppose they sort of yes and no. I think for some reason music is just more sort of immediate. I think I went to see Baba Mal. That was my last concert. So yeah, I went to the West African music from death metal.
Oh yeah,
random. But and that was I think the sort of the drums and the sound and the, you know, it's such a great gig. Sort of felt very immediate. I think films stay with me a little bit longer. I think they, you know, it can have the same emotional impact. But I feel like it's like such a different medium. I think on an emotional level for sure. But then you can actually get moved by. I finally caught up on a movie called The Prayers for Stolen, which was a Mexican film. And I just can't stop thinking about this film. You know, it just had such a beautiful impact on me. It was so wonderfully told. It's based on a book, I believe. But it had a sort of a real after effect for a very long time. You know, maybe it's the same thing. I don't know. It definitely plays with your emotion, and it feels like you're more in it for sure.
Yeah. You know, that brings up something that they mentioned in Preserving the Vision, but it just mentioned in there. I'm such a fucking loser. It mentioned in there that Seven had a big impact on you. Was that I am a giant Fincher fan. A lot of DPs we've had on here are obviously Darius, insane cinematographer. Was it the look of that film that stuck with you more than the message, or was it the writing?
Is it? I'm not sure where it's written in the whole story. So I went to see
Oh.
Seven. I went to
Let's
see
see.
Seven thinking it's a comedy.
Oh no.
Yeah.
It just says it's your first most deeply memorable cinematic experience, and you couldn't speak for an hour after seeing it, and it was traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say the first cinematic experience probably was watching the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, as a kid. I think that was such a, I just have such a vivid memory of it. Seven was a different story. It just came out. Poland just changed the system. Trailers weren't sort of a thing. So somebody said to me, do you want to go and see a movie? What is it? I don't know. I think it's a comedy. All right, let's go. So yeah, I went there, and obviously it wasn't. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's not a comedy. And then I realized very quickly it wasn't a comedy. But I think there is a sort of a very different preparation you do when you know that you're going to see something traumatic. Where when you see a comedy, you're pretty open. I was shell shocked. I was deeply traumatized.
That title sequence alone probably was like, oh no.
You know what? I think it took me a little while because we had such a naive way of looking at Western cinema at the time. We just like, there has been, and I'm not saying that Poland does not have a great cinema. It's just a totally different storytelling. So watching Seven was just, I think it was different regardless to anyone, whoever has seen the movie, because it was so dark. And I don't think that there has been many films to that level of darkness in the print and darkness in the story. It had. Did you hear the story? Did you read about the story of how it actually have ever been made?
I've watched the like special features on it, but I also, what sucks is I have that Darius Kanji book, and I haven't read it yet.
It's great, actually, but the story I think is, and I don't know, cut it out if I'm saying lies, but my understanding is that the script was sent over to Fincher, but they sent the wrong script because no one wanted to make it because it was so dark. And they did a rewrite, whoever has done the rewrite, and that script meant to go to Fincher to be made, but it was actually the earlier version. So Fincher read it and then said, I love it, I want to make it. But the studio said, well, no, it's not this version. We want to send you another version. It was like, no, but I really love this version. So I thought that was the story. But
I think you're right, actually. I think I have heard that. Because of course it's going to be the more fucked up version that he's like, oh yeah, let's make that. But also visually, that film is, man, we're going to jump around on the question spectrum here, but because I want to get to Russian Doll in a little bit, but in that first episode that you're nominated for, congratulations. There is kind of the whole thing takes place at night, but there is, I've noted, like the black level and like especially I guess some of the greens, it does have a little bit of seveniness to it in some ways. That's very appealing to me.
Yeah, there was a lot of films sort of looking at 70s film, sort of print, slower stock. So in my wildest dream, Russian Doll was relatively low budget, especially in New York, shooting in coronavirus and during the pandemic, and also I think permit-wise, I still don't quite understand, but I know that New York is just very strict.
Unless you're Law and Order SVU, then you can shoot wherever you want. Probably.
So the idea was that I wanted to have a slightly brighter sources, but I think we had to do what we could afford, but definitely the idea was that we will have whether T20 or actually we had T20 and the 24 light next to each other to give a bit of spread and then a punch. that was the sort of way of looking at New York. So the idea is that everything will go into darkness, and you kind of can light little ways. And then my my lad was very contrasty as well. And it's my first collaboration with Greg Fisher from Company Free, but we sort of been talking about working together for a while, and he has done a lot for me before. So when we did the test, we really looked at the blacks and how the highlights reacted, and how we can bring the midtones down to sort of get that more grungy feel. And it's so important to get that impact between the 2022 and 1980s. So, and Greg used to work in the lab. So, so he's really knowledgeable. And, when I was assistant and at film school, we only really learned film. So that was quite interesting. I remember telling DPs, the printer lights, when after in the morning when I called the lab because they couldn't talk. So it was a different world. And some sort of film emulation was definitely in our mind. Obviously, it's a digital world, so you can only do as much. But I like my blacks clean. I think there's a tendency that I try to get them as clean as possible.
Yes, that's especially there. There's one very brief moment where the main character is walking down a staircase into the subway, and I noticed that you can see everything. It's very dark down there, but you can see everything, and it's not muddled. And but the texture of the image is still very, I suppose, diffuse. Even in the sharper modern stuff, it still has a very filmic look to it, I suppose. And I hate, like, nowadays you can't use the word filmic or cinematic without a bunch of people on YouTube jumping out of the computer and strangling you. So I try not to, but it does have that look. And there was a few questions I actually wanted to ask you about that. One, in the LUT development, what are you aiming for? Obviously you said clean blacks, but like color wise, for instance, the Neighborhood Watch guys, I noticed they're red berets. That is not a digital red. That red is definitely like, deepened. How would you say it in DaVinci Resolve terms?
It's been heightened. Yeah.
What other colors are you shifting around? Because digital, the Sony Venice is an amazing camera, but what colors are you manipulating, and how are you manipulating to get them away from digital and into more, let's say, film-like?
I remember that the reference for 1980s and the way how we built the LUT was somehow a still from The Headless Woman. It's Lucretia Martel's still, and I love that film so much. I love the framing of it. I love Lucretia Martel. I mean, she's just incredible director. And there is a moment where the character is in the cyan bathroom, and I don't know whether there is a red or maybe we just made up, but in my head there is, but there might not. So somehow that becomes sort of a reference for building the LUT. So I think I had some lights. So it's just, it's a bit of trial and error a little bit, because I think when I do camera test, I want to do as many days of camera tests as I can. And the producer says, no, you have 1 day. And I said, that's never enough. So you sort of try to steal as many days as you can do. So, whenever I went to Aria and I filmed something, and then I did the camera test and I filmed something. And then we did the hair and makeup test, which obviously was very informative. So we looked at the different color temperatures, and then I took the camera out on the street as well, which actually I think that's what was the basis of building the 1980s LUT, because it was quite blue and cyany. So we pushed the science for sure, and then the reds actually stayed from. So we had the 2022 look, which was a sort of a rough replication to what season 1 was, but with our own interpretation of it. So we didn't want to do too many different things, but we've changed the way how blacks reacted in highlights and midtones, because sort of, the lights only work to your style of lighting. Right. And from that point, we did a test on the tungsten fixture, which was this and the exterior shot become a basis for all the 1980s. So we pushed the science. We sort of reds were the same, but maybe we made them a little bit deeper. We made the stock slightly more contrasty, and I think it just the midtones sat a little bit lower than the rest, more or less. I mean, it just meant to feel a bit more contrasty. I think that's the idea. It's the simulation of the film stock. So I had a couple of references. One was from Headless Woman. Then we had Mean Street as well. There was a shot on the street. So sort of the idea was that, we have cruder type of light to then allow everything else to be darker. Because, if you expose everything in New York and you do periods, then you're going to see all sorts of problems. But when you make it more contrasty, the VFX is going to be better. And actually, it's more in tune to how films have been shot that time.
Yeah, that brings me. So this is how terrible my notes are. That none of this is connected. This is all over this. So, I have to stare at it, and I'm like, what did I mean by that? But one thing that you kind of touched on it is you say but it doesn't feel like a low budget film at all. Though I suppose you could intuit that this isn't a Marvel production. The setups are relatively simple. They're not like super exaggerated or anything. And I was wondering if you could kind of walk me through some of the maybe like, for instance, on the platform or in the subway, just as one example, or in the house that Charlito Copley's in. Those lighting setups seem very simple, and if you were to just take a camera and go shoot with overhead practicals, it would not look cinematic. So what are you doing to adjust those things and achieve a look that looks that good? Emmy-nominated good. Versus just top light, from whatever fluorescence.
So I actually, I spend long hours walking around New York streets and did a lot of freaking out because, and then, I can't have a condor on every street, but if we expose characters, to the ambient light, it's just not going to look right for any period. So the system has become is that I had a 9-light, mainly 9-light tungsten for backlight, and the good thing, the saving grace of the shoot was that we only could see one side of the street because that's the side we could hide with the period cars. Because during the pandemic, New York regulation is that you can only dress one side of the street. The other one has to be as untouched and accessible to the resident, or at least we can't do anything about that. So it was always trying to find and build a little tower for the backlight. So most of the streets have backlight. And I think that's like one really important factor. A, Natasha's hair looked fabulous when it's backlit, and B, also it is such a different look to the season 1 of the modern time, and we really needed to continue having this philosophy of being in the period. So backlight was there's one thing, and then for because most of the shots are sort of tracking shots. Right. And I put me and my gaffer, Jared Mlentkin, put zap lights, sometimes diffused, sometimes open phase for sort of like an effect. So they're sort of.
You're saying zip lights?
Zip lights. Yeah, okay, cool. I always call them zap lights. Terrible.
Well, for all I know, that's one I don't know about. I had to make sure.
I think I said it's zap light to somebody else the other day. Zip light, indeed. The soft boxes, because they're sort of soft and hard. So a lot of front lighting is the period stuff is lit by that, and then every now and then we always put some color in it. Mainly, I think 013 and maybe CTS. I don't remember. I think both. Sometimes, most of the time, I think they were dimmed, and then when they come too close, we just put a little diffusion. But they were sort of, they were just direct straight onto faces. So you've got that sort of street light effect a little bit. And because the light was so contrasty, which was the idea, and I wanted to shoot it on deeper stop, which not always worked. That's my partner. They sort of worked, it created that contrast where everything else went more to the darkness. And it was tricky. It was very tricky because a lot of the time we sort of, when we got a street, we couldn't really say, oh, this doesn't work. There was one street when I did say, please, let's change the location, because that ended up being in Tompkins Square. I just couldn't figure it out. I wouldn't know how to light it. It was a 360 around Nadia and Nora. And I was like, I just have nowhere to hide the lights, and continue with that idea. And it made more sense, actually. I think Natasha really loved that. And it did become the culmination scene of the App 1. But it created Michelle, the location, a lot of problems because we had to find a flat or an exit connecting to Tompkins Square. And there was a lot of hot zones there. So, I mean, the locations have done an incredible job. But it looked great. Like, I was very happy with where we ended up shooting, and it made sense. And I think Natasha loved it. It was just connecting. It's just the connectivity, because a lot of stuff with Russian doll is almost immediate. So one connects to another, and you want to have some sort of continuity of location rather than going from, I don't know, especially when you're in New York, you kind of know you go on the 23rd Street and then you end up on the 2nd. I mean, everyone would know.
Right. They do that in Westworld a lot, I've noticed. When they're playing LA, you're like, all right, that's Santa Monica and that's downtown. You didn't leave that exit. Liars.
Yeah, and as a Londoner, it drives me insane when people do the same thing in London drama. It's like, of course it's not connecting. So yeah, and it was super important for Natasha to and I was like, I'm 100% behind you. I totally understand what you're saying.
You know what's funny is I just saw this stat that said there's more people in LA County than in like 30 or 40 states. Like, and so you think someone who's like making those, oh yeah, they get off on the street, no one's gonna know. It's like, actually, statistically, more people will know.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. The actually, and also to your point about Natasha's hair's looking great in the backlight. There's a few shots in that first episode where you just straight up shoot dead into the backlight. It's in the shot, and I appreciated it. I appreciated the brazenness.
That wasn't that. That was the desperation. That was like, oh my God, hopefully it doesn't look like a lamp. Yeah, it happened once and it gives me heebie-jeebies. We had a bad day that day. It was a terrible day. That was always a bad day. That was that day. So by the time when we shot the scene, it was like, I just said to the Steadicam operator, just do whatever you can. And he went, okay, we go lower.
Yeah. Were you trying to avoid something in the background?
Oh God. I mean, Devon had to avoid, especially with Steadicam, it's like the streets of New York are not very wide when you go around the Lower East Side. So yeah, you have to avoid a lot of stuff. Well,
to be fair, it totally looks like it sells as a street light. I know it wasn't, but DP brain.
Busted.
Yeah, but that's fine. You got nominated for an Emmy. No one's it's giving everyone permission to do the same thing. Actually, my friend, I interviewed him on this. We went to college together. He got nominated for an Emmy for outstanding social interest documentary or whatever that is. So I'm hoping between the two of you, I can get some of that rubbed off on me and maybe get a job.
You talking about Ruby?
No, it's called In the Dark of the Valley.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Very good documentary. And weirdly enough, and again, it's just my friends from college. Second most listened to podcast episode we've ever done by a huge margin, and it's like three buddies from Arizona State, like talking about the documentary two of them made. You know, it's funny how things like that can happen. I wanted to actually, I'll stick in this realm for the game, not the Fincher film, but the television show you did, which I tried to get on Blu-ray, but yeah, I have to buy it on Amazon as like a streamer, which I have not done yet. But I've seen
deep.
I was awake last night, and so I was looking at some of the stills from it, and the shots you got inside, even those offices, those kind of like brutalist offices, are very they're very pretty. And I was wondering if you had advice for making an office like, I guess this is a larger question about like modifying practicals and sort of massaging existing light into light that you want. And then secondarily, like, would you say that your style kind of sits in trying to make everything seem single source? Or am I making that up in my head?
No, I mean, I haven't thought of it, but probably. It has to feel like it's a part of the, don't know. I'll get back to you. Okay. We had an incredible designer on the show, sadly dead, Michael Cowles. It was my first night exterior. I shot my first interior where I could modify it and add fixtures. Like, I was so green. It was a long time ago. And Michael built sets with pivot windows, pivot. The whole glass room, the glass rooms when they were going and talking about their, which I think you must have seen one of the stills. They were all sort of on little swivels. I didn't even know that you can do stuff like that.
Right, to kill reflections.
Yeah, and camera shadows people to some degree. And it was really interesting because the gaffer didn't really, Andrew Taylor, we sort of saw an eye to eye at the end, but I think he didn't like the idea of a top light. And I wanted to, it didn't quite work out this way, but I wanted to do as much as I could with already lit set. So Michael and I talked a lot about practicals. I drove him totally insane. And I wanted to have wall lights pretty much everywhere. And then in the Brutalist library, we had so many fixtures put up. And we created patterns from it. So it looks good on camera and it looks good for lighting. So we have them diffused. And it was such a, I don't know, like I look at this show and I sort of don't know how I knew stuff. And I fought for a lot of things, but I kind of couldn't really quite understand why. It was just sort of like a gut instinct and a lot of help from other people. But I knew that there is a certain elements, like, I knew that there has to be as many fixtures as I could. They have to be in the middle. They had to create one single light source. Otherwise, they're just not going to, I want the walls to go to shadows as much as I could. So, and that location was so fabulous. I don't really know whether it exists anymore. It was an old library, which they were moving out to the modern one, and we just got permission. It was just so last minute. We had so many people working on it because by the time when the deal was made for us to film in there, I think we were almost shooting, or we were like a week before. So we did a lot of locations first, and then somehow I've managed to convince Brian Cox to shoot nights with us. The other DP, Sam McCurdy, was a little bit smarter, and he blacked out the whole atrium. I didn't know that you could do it either. And but there was a couple of shots I remember, because the idea within the game is that anyone can spy on each other. So we had those shots, sort of long zoom shots of of all those floors with people working on it, and I think we were zooming out. That was the beginning sequence, the beginning sort of just pre the titles, I think. I don't remember. But it was, I mean, I'm superbly proud of it. It's like things like there has been Miner's Blackout, and I didn't know how to do Moonlight. I just knew that I really like Wendy Light because I've seen it. I have been lucky enough to be on film sets before as an assistant. And I've been lucky enough that on my last job as an assistant, I was making sure that Chris Menges had all the lighting notes because he loved having his lighting setups done. So me and the best boy, the best boy was really writing everything down. And I was sort of, I was studying carefully, driving Chris crazy. But I've actually realized that was the best film school I have ever had, because when it came around to working on the game and having lighting setups, I knew how Wendy lights look like, and I knew that it's going to give me a spread, and I knew that it's going to be okay. And I really don't like too pingy highlights. Yeah. So I tried to, although that wasn't part of the Russian doll, like Russian doll, I wanted to have spread and pink. But
Natasha's skin tone very pink.
Pardon?
Natasha's skin tone is like very white, but also pink undertones.
Yeah, she did get pink, especially for the 1944s, because we did a lot of we did sort of like our version of 2-strip Technicolor. Anyway, but it's like Wendy Light is just a 650 small bulbs in 48. I think that's a half Wendy. 48 fixture, or 128. I think that's a full Wendy because it comes with 4 tiles, and it's an incredible light.
Yeah,
48, 92, something like that.
I mean, you don't got to know. That's what the gaffer's job is. Is there anything that you? It sounds like you learned quite a bit in that project. Because one thing I did want to ask you was like, when you get a new script, how do you balance excitement about wanting to do it versus the fear of not knowing how to do it? And what did you learn from that project?
You panic and then you learn on the job. I mean, I was very scared. I mean, it's just, I think you look at things and you learn and you ask people questions. I think I was really lucky enough to have I was never afraid to ask questions if I didn't know something, because especially in a project that large, and I think consecutively on every project, if I didn't know, I had always somebody who I can ask a question. And sometimes asking question doesn't give you the answer you want or I wanted, but it led me to the answer, oh, I don't want that, which was great as well. So asking questions sometimes is just so helpful, because it just manages, at least in my case, manages to sort of get my thoughts put together. And then, there's only a certain amount of solutions to something. I don't know. I think it's that and sort of not quite realizing how big a challenge it is. Being quite naive, which is great. But I'm super happy with the game, and it sort of looks exactly how I wanted it. So it was great.
That's awesome. Actually, talking about the Chris Menges thing, I do have a note that says it's for Dirty Pretty Things, if anyone wants to watch. when having all those notes about contrast ratios, I think this is something that beginner cinematographers don't quite grasp, is how limited contrast ratios should be, I suppose. And I'm throwing should in huge air quotes. But, you know, like a 3-to-1 ratio on a face is actually quite contrasty. You know, like half a stop, a quarter of a stop really does matter in a lot of cases. I was wondering if you could kind of speak to maybe if you remember at that point when you realized like how kind of precise you had to be with lighting. Because these days, especially with, you know, LEDs and those pigtail bulbs you buy on Amazon and stuff, people just plop them up and go, it's lit. And you're like, well, you can see it.
I think nowadays, I mean, so I think with film is different. So my first job, I did 2 jobs with Chris Menges. The first job, I was a trainee. That was Dirty Pretty Things. And the last job was Notes on a Scandal. And on that job during prep, I got into the film school and become unbearable because I was following him everywhere.
Just a little tape recorder.
Yeah. I'm really sorry. But the on Dirty Pretty Things, I was super green. Because it was my first job really in the industry. But Chris asked me to do Polaroid stills and then measure the highlight and the shadow on faces. So I was walking around with light meter, and I sort of looked at Judi Dench. No, that was a different film. I did that to Judi Dench as well. But I was looking at the highlight and shadows on faces and writing it down with a pen on his Polaroid, and then put it in his script. And I don't know, like I think if somebody allows you to do something like that, there is a lot of memory which you can retrieve later, because I didn't really start lighting until like 5-6 years later. But I do remember those lessons. I don't know what I think about the contrast level now. I think a lot of things can change within how contrasty your light is. But I do have a certain aesthetics to it, but also it depends on the show, and it depends. TV drama is very fast paced. You know, we don't really have time too much to finesse lighting. You know, a lot of the time, a lot of the time, you know, you're slightly behind, and things don't go exactly the way how we sort of want it. And I always think about scenes and stills. So sort of, you know, have a one image, one setup, which sort of, you know, summarize the story, summarize that moment, and then sort of take it from there. So always try to strive for a still, which I'm really happy. And a lot of the times is then coverage. I think if you can have silhouette, it sort of really depends on the location as well. And I'm very prepared. I try to be as prepared as I can. But things change on set as well. Actors change their blocking. You know, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I don't think just that much contrast necessarily on Russian Doll. I think with, you know, Natasha also had a fringe and then hair next to the face. You know, it does limit the way how your key light be placed.
Yeah, it is actually, now that you mention it, there isn't really, on people's faces, it isn't very contrasty at all. The scene is, but they are pretty even.
And I think it was really it was very important for Natasha. So, you know, you get hired as a cinematographer on a project, but you know, there is a lot of flexibility to what we can do. But also there is a desire of the creators of how the show should look like. And I think we have to be respectful of it. So there is a certain requirement from Natasha. And I was like, fine, you know, this is style of the show. We can create contrast in a different way.
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect segue. I wanted to know what it's like to work with a director who's also the main character, and how that differs from working with a director who's fully, you know, behind the camera.
Well, the thing is that Russian Doll was directed by Natasha and Alex. You know, they had fantastic, Alex Bueno. They had a fantastic collaboration together. They had a lot of trust together. and you know, I think it was tricky for Natasha at times because obviously it's a very different hat. But I was not only working with Natasha; we also had Alex, and Alex was on set every day. They've been discussing choices together among themselves, and then we discuss them together with heads of department, myself, Diane, and whoever was. So, but I always had a director with me. It's if not two of them, then there was one. And when Natasha wasn't in front of the camera, then she was close to us. So yeah. It didn't make that much difference, to be honest. And also, Natasha, I think by the time we were filming, things already have been decided, more or less,
Sure. Yeah, there's I can't remember which actor it was, but I remember one, I think it was a guy saying that the best piece of advice he got was if you're the director, to make sure that you get one more take. Because, I guess actors who are directors just want to get, they don't want to feel vain, so they're like, I'll do it in two, and the guy was like, no, just do it until you get it. Don't be an asshole. Everyone's standing around making sure you do it good.
I think there's definitely, but I think that's universally, I think the scene has to feel right. But people get caught up in the moment. Sometimes it might not feel right and it is right. Sometimes it feels right and it isn't right. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't my saving grace with Russian Doll was that I really wanted to do and be part of the storyboarding session. And I don't know how it is in America, but in Europe, you're always very involved within the camera lensing and mood board. So so it feels very collaborative. And I think we had about a month on and off, sort of in between of scouting, where Peter Beck, Natasha, and Alex and myself sat for hours on Zoom, getting deliveries or cooking, and then breaking down majority of the script, at least in its main sequences. So that was we were sort of quite prepared from it. We had an idea of what we're going to do, all of us.
Sure. Yeah. I think over here it kind of depends on. I think it can go either ways. I've heard plenty of stories. People like, yeah, showed up on the day, but I think those are commercials, not necessarily scripted stuff. Go ahead.
I think people have a very different style of working, and I think that there are people who prepare, they're directors who prepare themselves, and they want to know, they set the shots where we're going to make a story. This is the minimum amount of shots, and then we discuss it on set. There's some people who say, oh, let's figure out how we're going to shoot it on the day when the actors come in. I think there really isn't a set rules.
Totally. I was actually just reminded, again, by my ridiculous notes, there's a great amount of, especially at the beginning of that first episode, interplay between warm and cool light. Key lights, or I guess it kind of depends, but keys seem to be kind of warm, feel a little cool. And I was wondering if maybe you could walk us through your methodology behind mixing color temperatures, because especially on digital, I feel like it can be harder. It gets muddier than film. Or do I have that backwards? I feel like film shows color contrast a lot easier, whereas with digital, you kind of have to goose it a little bit.
I didn't notice that. I mean, the thing what I like about, I think
there's the expert.
There's certain camera sensors which do get muddier, but a lot of the time, I think the rule, for me at least, the rule is the same. If you have a healthy negative, and you don't underexpose too much, and that's the style. I've seen people underexposing Venice, where they rated it 64,000 just to have a very thin neck, and that's a part of the look, and it looks really beautiful. But if you want to have healthy contrast and heavy blacks, then you have to create contrast. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And then within the color separation, I mean, I found, I suppose both LF and Venice are very good, Alexa LF. And then I'm testing Alexa 35 tomorrow when I'm filming. So I will
It's a
let
fun
you know. I
camera.
think they have a very healthy way of color separation. The sensors are pretty amazing. So I didn't have that problem really.
Well, were you sort of setting sort of just a regular tungsten daylight sources and then plopping setting the camera to like 4300, or was there a little more finesse there?
So with Russian doll, we had 4 LUTs. Each LUT had a different feel to it. The most important part was to differentiate the LUTs around the circular train and the train story, because she obviously travels. There is a moment where she travels from 22 to 80s and so on. So we wanted to, like, with that in mind, we wanted to make sure that there's different color temperatures. I can shoot on anything color temperature wise. It could be 6,500 to I don't think I've done 2,700, but I'm sure that it could happen, but unlikely. So it could be tungsten, it could be daylight color temperature. I think it's just sort of how it feels right, and I made notes of what sort of is predominant color feel, and then obviously we chose the fixtures to complement it. So the 60s were warmer. The idea is that there is more tungsten light around it, so the LUT reflected that. And then 1944 was a little bit of the experiment. We didn't know what is going to work, because we had all these setups in Kaleti Station at night, and I just didn't know. We knew that we wanted to have I think Attila Docci was our gaffer in Budapest, and he didn't want to have any backlight, and I was like, we need to have backlight.
He's like, that's old.
And I think we had the HMI at the time. I think we put 9K, which is very unusual for me. But it's the only source which could give us punch and where we can find the place. So there was like a gantry just above, and we put it on a corner. And it worked out really nicely, but we didn't know whether that LUT is going to work. We created that LUT without really having the proper lighting setup for it. So that's obviously really scary, because I haven't been working with the DIT. I mean, we had the DIT, we had a lovely DIT, but it was very quick shoots. So we really haven't had time to build any language together. But it worked. And Greg, our colorist, would say, of course it worked, but I didn't know.
There's that is the one advantage to a lot of these modern, your LFs, your Venices, your Alexa 35s is that sort of digital negative, so to speak, is so robust that you can move those colors around quite a bit, and usually you can get away with it, especially when you're shooting raw.
Yeah, because you're not baked into anything. And we did shoot raw on this. We had a lot of visual effects, and I wanted to shoot as best quality as I could.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh boy, this is where we start cutting things. Oh, lenses. So you said that you in a separate interview that you had shot Baltars for the older stuff and Leicas for the newer stuff, correct?
So we had Baltars for 80s and 60s, and then when we went to Budapest, we got Super Baltars, which are 1960s lenses, and then Leica C Summicron. I never remember which one's which.
I never keep them. What's the difference?
Stop. I actually did check. One is 1.4 and the other one is, I think, T2 or T2.1, something like that.
Gotcha. And were you shooting those Baltars wide open?
No. Most of the time, I tried to keep it at least 2.8. In ideal world, everything would be shot T4, but sometimes we just couldn't.
I was going to say that because the texture of the Baltars really comes through in a lot, like even just like in simple shots, like in the bathroom where she's first learning the It's the first episode, whatever. She's her mom. And I was like, do I give this away? It's like, first episode, come on. But that texture is very fun. And I think there is a difference between, and this is for maybe the younger DPs out there. There's a difference between shooting something wide open and having a lens with texture, because wide open can just look fuzzy with no sensibility, and texture you can shoot at a T4 or whatever and still get that cool fudgy vignette thing going on, or whatever the lens might do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that bathroom was actually shot that was wide open, which was fine. But the streets were 2.8 at least, 2.8.5 at least. So I just wanted to see more depth, especially it was all, the whole philosophy was all about contrast and deeper stop. And then, there was a creative leeway to other things. I mean, it's a modern Nadia in an old body,
Yeah. I actually, can you speak to any risks you took on this film? This is something that I've recently, with guests on this show, started realizing that doesn't get asked a lot, because a lot of times when you get hired for these jobs, some people have said, like, you don't take any risks. You're hired to get this thing in the can and do it properly. Were there any times where you were kind of like pushing your limit a little bit and maybe like a little nervous about making a choice that you thought was maybe good creatively? Maybe a little bit sketchy.
The whole train sequence was very nerve-wracking, because when I'm saying, going back to what I said, when I'm saying low budget, obviously we had a budget, but it was stretched. And building LED walls, the question you ask yourself is like, is this conviction we had is like, could it work on black, or could it work with green? Could we do anything cheaper and still look the same? And actually, now I'm looking at it, it led to so many creative, wonderful shots. But the shot where Nadia goes from train to train, I mean, that wasn't from train to train. There was like a tiny little butt end of a train, and then she goes into our main train. So we just framed exactly the tiny little butt end of it.
The guideline just right up against the wall.
Exactly. Or the cut.
Yeah.
That shot was never planned, and actually looks rather fabulous, and it looks heightened, and it looks, that you're in some sort of LED screen. I think your eye can notice that, but it's so heightened, so elevated. It's like one of my more favorite shots. And then all this sort of extra reflections you have, these details you probably wouldn't have put in post, because there's only as much imagination we can have in creating sort of so there, all the shots outside of the carriage. I was sitting with an iPad by the monitor and just looping stuff which I thought was interesting for emotional beat, so it's already baked in within the shots, and it was great because there are like little moments where it just felt right. So it's like, oh, now is the train, or now we're gonna do the light effect, or we had more control to sort of emote things with lighting. And
you can like art design your light a little bit more. Yeah, because like even some of I remember like the sort of effect when she's going back to the 80s it's kind of like 2001-y. It's a little bit of this thing,
Yeah. We're all big fan of it. Actually, I went to see in the South Bank again. I went to see 2001 with London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Wow.
And it was absolutely, it was from a cinematic viewpoint, you've got when the orchestra is playing, there's a lot of spill of light onto the screen. But the actual, that's almost going almost the full loop to our first question. the musical experience of it was just so fabulous. Like when you listen to something live, music wise, it just heightens your perception of the movie. It was just truly extraordinary. And the whole sequence with the slit screen, when he's traveling, I just had goosebumps all the way through. It was just the best thing ever.
The vocals on that arrangement specifically are fucking haunting. Like sometimes that just pops up in my head and I'm like, get out of there.
So there was a live choir on both ends. So we had the orchestra in the middle, and then the male and female choirs sort of singing against each other, because it's like a duel.
Yeah. Oh, that must have been so cool.
It really was.
That's the true. People say film versus digital. No, there's live versus recorded. That's the real that's the real difference. I guess that is what we were saying at the beginning. Actually, going back to the beginning, one of my favorite moments on this podcast I've ever had, and I know I got to let you go soon, it's a little later than I expected, but one of my favorite moments on this podcast is I was talking to Tim Ives about photography, and and he was like, do you want to see some photo books? And I was like, yeah. And then he spent like 25 minutes walking me through his favorite photo books. It's the best moment ever. And I had read somewhere that you have a large collection of photo books.
I don't know if it's a large. It's never enough.
Yeah, well, that's more what I meant. You obsessively collect them when you can.
Yeah, I just ordered another one. I'm really into at the moment. I'll show you. I'm really into this Australian. It's Trent Park, but it's him and his wife. Also, his wife photographs are incredible. I've ordered another audition of that, and he's just so fabulous. This one is his one before the latest one, Crimson Line, and but I love he actually was really interesting, because I think his first photographs was sort of he was walking around with Ilford 3200 ISO and tried to photograph. One of the iconic photographs I remember is the sort of like heavily overexposed, but sort of long exposure with this sort of huge highlights. It's one of the buildings in Australia. I don't know, is it Sydney or Melbourne? Very grainy and with just those sort of highly overexposed moments. One is like a overexposed person. They're all extremely haunting, but very familiar. Just has this incredible eye of making something ordinary extremely heightened.
Yeah. Are there is there a photo book that's kind of like your white whale, like the one that you your holy grail that you're trying to get a hold of? Because photo books can get very expensive, or they only printed like 10 of them.
I really wanted to get the Chromes, which I did in the end. The William Eggleston. It took me a long time to get it without like paying totally ridiculous amount of money.
Right.
I really love anything by Rinko Kawauchi. She's a photographer. She's a Japanese photographer. She's just so. I came across her exhibition in Photographer's Gallery, and I just stumbled upon it. I never heard of her, and it was the photographs of her family, and there was so much storytelling in there. She's really truly wonderful. No, I don't think so. I think it's like a lot of. Oh, I really like Henry Guyer. He did one of my favorite books is the TV shots, and it's signed by him.
Oh wow, I've never heard of that.
Hold on, I need to open this. 1 second.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Okay.
Hold on.
I think it's Annie.
Yeah, what's happening?
I'm trying to find that book, but I can't at this moment. It's somewhere.
Books.
And I love Soul Lighter and
Yeah, I can't get any of those books. They're all too expensive.
oh really? I've got Diane Arbus, Vivian Mayer,
I'll show you. I'll show you two. This one is very fun. Hollywood and Kodachrome.
Oh yeah,
It's
that's
just,
yeah.
I just love like all these. It's very interesting to see all these like old lighting setups and stuff. Like getting photos of Lucille Ball in color is just a very strange experience to me, especially when she's done up all, very pretty and.
So now you cost me money. That's great.
No, this one's actually in print, so you can get this one, Rita Hayworth and stuff. But
no, but now I have to buy it.
It's very cool. It's a nice little thick guy too. But
Hollywood and Kodachrome. Hold on, I need to write it down because there's no way.
Yeah, I truly think it's like $30 or $40. Like it wasn't that expensive. I got it on Amazon. Where was? Does this say?
Right. Okay, in.
I can't find the price on this thing for the life of me. That's all right. But before I let you go and ask you the last two questions, I will brag. I have the Roger Deakins
I got
book,
it too.
But
is it signed? Oh, very nice.
The most likes I've ever gotten on Instagram. Photo of me standing next to Roger Deakins and his wife. She was funny. She was like, you can tell he didn't. I mean, I'm sure he wanted to be there, but you could tell she was like, say hello and go, pushing him around. You go. James is clearly the energy behind that movement. Anyway, I like to end every podcast with the same two questions. Kind of works for TV shows, but not quite. First one being, if you were to program season 2 of Russian Doll in a double feature, so to speak, what would the other film or television series be?
Pardon?
So, like, it only really works for movies, so you're going to have to do a bit of a mental exercise.
Okay.
So you're programming at like a festival, and Russian Doll season 2 is going to be in a double feature. What do you make the other film or series that people see?
Not mine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be, but it can be whatever you want.
Russian Doll in 7?
There you go. We can take that. That'll be a good one. I was interviewing Jeff Cronenweth for the I Love Lucy film he did, whatever, Being the Ricardos. And I was like, what would you do for a double feature? And he goes, Alien versus Predator. Good one, dude.
I really actually another experience I had, and I'm a massive fan, is Alien. The first Alien.
One of the best on Blu-ray. Incredible.
So I went to see it in the Albert Hall, and with the live orchestra as well, and that was amazing.
Projected on 35.
I don't know actually, because it's almost like the picture is secondary. I have seen it in the cinema, but the film which I was extremely lucky to see, which in the cinema fairly recently, is an Altman movie, which Oliver Stapleton has shot. And is it Kansas City? Hold on, let me just check. I always remember. It's the one with the jazz and Kansas City. And that was the print was the original print intended, with the silver highlights. So it was the bleach bypass.
Wow.
Well, not bleach bypass.
ENR.
No. Yeah, bleach bypass. So we've got this sort of silver highlight. Amazing blacks. And on the print.
I don't think I've ever seen a projection of, because I live relatively close to Quentin Tarantino's theater. They only show 35.
Amazing! Yeah.
But so I got to see The Matrix in there. That was cool. like an original print of The Matrix, original print of Fight Club and stuff. Oh, like no, Fight Club. There we go. That was ENR. That was tons of bleach bypass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely like that's like the OLED of film, you know, where it just goes black.
It was so incredible. I mean, I love that film, but I love the cinematography of it. I thought it was, Oliver's one of the best work I've seen. And just fabulous sequences of the musicians where, musical numbers. I actually really love films with big music. I think, yeah, that was pretty awesome, actually. There's definitely a running streak. That goes back to your question. I don't know. I can't differentiate that. The music and the cinema is all the same, right? That's my answer.
So that's kind of I agree. I try not to. I have a problem where I will ask a question, but I'm not trying to get an answer. But in the question, I will say what I think, and I have to stop doing that. But I also agree. I think it's all the same when you're with people. Obviously, live music is going to definitely affect because the dynamic range of the sounds that are coming to you and the mixing. Anytime you see a recording of something or listen to a recording of something, it's compressed into whatever that format allows. Whereas when you hear something live, it's completely expressive in all of its glory.
But we respond to music, I think, more than visuals.
We definitely invented music before we invented film. We came out the chute and started beating on rocks or whatever, percussion especially. But I want to start interviewing musicians for this podcast because I started as a musician, as a drummer,
really?
and so
great.
As a drummer, and then I kind of got into guitar a little bit. I can sort of play guitar, but I've always been musically minded. And I'm always trying to draw parallels between music and cinematography. And I have yet to be able to articulate that. So I want to find some musicians who really love film because I know there's a ton, and kind of have that weird little conversation there in the Venn diagram that is those two brains,
You see, I want to listen to it because I had a big discussion with my musician friend, and she thought that the music is different to cinematography. And I said it isn't, but I couldn't really quite articulate why. And it is different. So I don't know. If you find people who will answer that dilemma, I'm going to send her that podcast. I need it.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. All right. So I was about to ask the last question, and I swear to God, we'll let you go. But now I'm going to tack in this third one. Oh no, it's gone. Oh, did you spend a lot of time watching DVD special features?
No, I don't think so. Although I did like the Criterion, during lockdown, we just watched a lot of old films. And then I remember the was it the Fritz Lang's movie?
Yeah.
That was the making of, or sort of, I think they do like a small documentary afterwards, and it was his first sound movie he's made, and there are sequences where it's silent, which is quite extraordinary. So he goes into the whole the sound design, and then there are moments where characters in white spaces and there's nothing. And he uses it in such a clever way that it's just extremely successful without knowing. It was like super instinctive. And there was a documentary on Criterion on it. And it's the same with The Foreign Correspondent and Hitchcock. That was a pretty amazing one. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say my pandemic project was collecting Criterion Blu-rays and just banging through the special features. The reason I ask is because I was a special features kid in the 90s, especially, and early 2000s. And I want to create a streaming platform just for those. Because I bet the rights to the DVD special features aren't very expensive. But so far, a lot of the DPs I've talked to have said that's a good idea. So now I just got to put it in the ether, someone with money, come find me. And I will figure this out.
It's a good idea. And especially if it's the right one, if it's informative. I think a lot of the times it's sort of more publicity led.
Nowadays, yeah, especially, it's very
learn.
frustrating. That back in like the early the 90s to early 2000, like there was about a decade and a half where DVD special features were all super educational, and they weren't PR companies, making, oh, it was so great to work with this actor. It was like, I remember I mentioned this before on a different podcast, but there's one I remember where they, like, someone was filming the director like having an argument with there's a famous video of David Lynch blowing up on a producer about not having enough time, but stuff like that's informative in many different ways. Okay, final question, then you can go. You'll need to come back, and then we can just do, have a whole evening. Is there a piece of advice or something you've read, or maybe a lesson that you've learned that has stuck with you over the years that keeps coming back?
I think it's just sort of maintaining the level of curiosity and making sure that questioning if it's familiar, whether it's always right. I don't know. Is it? I think it's being curious. I think that's really that sort of level, and the curiosity can be about anything. But I think it's if you have it and you have a passion for a project, you there's always a nice unexpected element. And the other thing is, I take stills. I think that's a great way of. I sometimes interview students for the film school, help out during the selection process, not the final, and it's really exciting to look at people's like Instagram nowadays. Just give such a amazing insight to the taste, to the wandering eye, and I think that could be for everyone. It's anyone in a visual medium can express their interest through stills. They don't need to be cinematic, but they really do exercise your point of view, I think.
Yeah, your storytelling brain, as it were.
Or curiosity of what interests you.
Yeah. That's fantastic advice. I personally, I will co-sign it. That's something I always have to remind myself to do. Is like, don't get.
Do you have your own Instagram? Do you have stills?
I do. I have to get better. At first, because I started that. Long story short, I used to work for Red Bull, and when Instagram first came out, Red Bull basically bought in wholesale. They knew like this is going to be the new thing, so they had all of the employees create an Instagram. But at first, it was just like advertising and trying to show, oh, we live cool lifestyles. But I did not live a cool lifestyle. I was a nerd, so it was a lot of nerdy dumb shit at first, and then now whatever. It's fucking like 12 years later. I'm trying to be a little more. I'm trying to curate it a little bit more and show good photography and stuff, not just like, for about 2 years there, I was just showing funny license plates that I found.
Okay, but that's fun. And what
Kenny's back of cars.
So what made you being interested in cinema? What was your first cinematic experience?
I remember being a kid of the 90s. Obviously it was like Star Wars, was huge. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was very big for me for some reason. Just the fantasy. I lived in a very, very small town, and the closest movie theater was 30 minutes away. And we would make that pilgrimage as much as possible because there was just nothing to do. So anything that was escapism was very important to me because I didn't like being in my house. I didn't like staring at, vineyards. And so what sucks is that meant that I wouldn't say it sucks, but like that meant I was, Men in Black was really cool. The Matrix, anything that was just not pure escapism in the sense of, frivolous fun, but just anything that wasn't reality, which meant that I took a very long time to start watching films that were more edifying, basically anything that was in the Criterion collection. Stuff like The Godfather, not interesting. It's too real. I wanted space. I wanted, anything that was out there. And then Jackass, but Jackass was very, very real.
That was very real. That was a bit too real.
Yeah.
I wish it was fantasy. But I completely understand. I mean, Matrix, when it came out, that was amazing. That blew my mind.
That was definitely the first film I remember watching, and it just combined, like metal music, this dark look that I had started to discover I liked, like cyberpunkiness, which I was, again, giant nerd, building my own computers at like 9. Kung fu. It was just all the things that a teenage boy needed, and luckily it transcended that. There's plenty of films that now I say I like, and people are like, don't tell people that. You grow up, you can say you liked Clerks, but then when you say you liked Mallrats, people are like, well, how about Dogma? And you're like, okay.
Very funny.
Yeah, so that's a little something about me. For the listeners, I won't cut it out. I won't cut out stuff about. I try to talk less about me because no one fucking cares. I haven't done anything. It's you guys that are far more interesting. But again, I would love to have you back on when you have some more time to just shoot the shit, because I think we could probably go for quite some time. But I will let you go. Thank you so much for spending the hour and some change with me. And congrats on the Emmy nom. That's I don't want to say confident, but I'm
that's
excited I'm excited to see what happens.
You know what? It has been real. I'm always very, very rubbish at it. It's been so much fun. Thank you for making me feel comfortable. Great start with death metal. I think that was the right in.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks again, and I had a great time too. I'm glad to hear that it was fun for you as well.
It was.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Mapbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.